Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Nation, good afternoon. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you. Got a loaded show for you today. The week 3 of fall camp is going to be closing this evening. BYU football will have a fall camp scrimmage number 2 to close out week 3. We will have full coverage from fall camp here today. We'll have interviews with Kelly Papinga, Justin Enna, Chase Roberts, and Fesi Satake coming up a little bit later this next 3 hours. So it's going to be a loaded show with football. We'll work in some basketball too.
Let's start things off like we always do at this time of year, Mitch, with the comings and goings of what's happening down at the Zions Bank practice field.
The starting lineup. A look at the stories making headlines right now. It's time for the starting lineup on Cougar Sports Saturday.
I love this time of year. It's just, the time goes by so fast in a good way. It's like, oh, football's back, but we've got multiple weeks of camp. Well, guess what? Camp is winding down. There's only a few practices left of camp starting in the middle of next week, Mitch. They'll close the books on 2024 fall camp, move into season prep, which means there's a lot of questions that have been answered. I think there's still some questions to be answered, specifically the quarterback battle. You were down there multiple times this week. Let's start things off there. What is the latest? What are your observations of that battle at quarterback?
This week has looked good for Jake Retzlaff. I've been impressed with Jake in both the Monday and Friday media observation portions. Friday was a little bit lackluster. There wasn't much energy at practice. It was an outdoor session. Mondays was indoors due to the inclement weather outside. But I thought Jake looked really good. He continued to get some first-team reps, Gary Bohannon as well. So no quarterback starter named officially yet, but Jake's improved from last season. And we have not seen him throw an interception yet. That's something coming up on Monday that I do want to talk to with coaches about. Has Jake thrown an interception? And I wonder that because in spring ball he did not throw a pick. And turnovers with Jake are a big talking point because of what happened last year in the Oklahoma game, the Iowa State game, and also in the Oklahoma State game too. Games that BYU, self-inflicted wounds cost BYU in many respects those 3 games. So, that's a noteworthy deal, but also Gary Bohannon continues to look solid too. The quarterback position for BYU, I think Cougar fans should feel good that it's improved, but coming in there was a low bar for what was expected of these 2 guys. I still believe the highest ceiling for these players is still probably 6 to 7 wins. I don't come out of fall camp feeling like these guys, whoever ends up being named the starter, is suddenly going to lead BYU to a Big 12 title and a college football playoff run, but they've made progress, and I think that's a start for this group.
I don't think either quarterback can win you games by himself. And there's teams in this conference that can, or quarterbacks in this conference that can. Avery Johnson's probably one of those guys. Noah Fafita at Arizona. Cam Rising's proven he can do it. I know I'm missing a few guys in the league, but KJ Jefferson, I think he's a really good quarterback. I don't know if you can just put the team on any quarterback's back. But that's okay. You can win a lot of games with quarterbacks that aren't like that. There's been teams throughout the history of college football, Mitch, that have won national championships with subpar quarterback play. You think about that Ohio State team back in the early 2000s with Maurice Claret. They didn't do a whole lot of anything in the past game. They had a lot of talent.
Craig Krenzel,
they win. So you don't have to have a dynamic, game-changing quarterback to win football games in college football. That's the good news. The thing that I've come away with these past couple weeks in watching the limited portions that we found, Mitch, I don't know if there is any separation. I think it's going to come down to preference in some regards, and I think it's going to come down to who do they think has the highest upside. And you can make an argument that both guys have the highest upside.
Well, if it's highest upside, you probably go Jake because he's got 2 years.
Right. But
that's honestly, if it's all things equal, I'd go the younger guy. But I also understand the argument to say, you know what? Give the guy who's got 1 year left, give him a crack, Gary Bohannon, see what he's got. And if he struggles, do not hesitate to go to quarterback number 2 in Jake Retzlaff and continue to battle. Because the nice thing that BYU's got going for him in this position group, Jake's locked in. He can't leave. I mean, he could, but no matter what, and I know this is not how you want to talk, but whenever you're talking about quarterback battles, you think, okay, who's going to leave for the portal if they don't get the job? Jake can't really leave this year because, well, if he does,
it's a lost year.
It's a lost year no matter what. He would go into 2025 with whatever school he's at as a senior. So he's already burned his red shirt. He can't do the Charlie Brewer thing that Utah did a couple years back after he lost to BYU. He then redshirted, and then he went to Liberty. Jake Retzlaff can't do that. So whether he's here or not, if he won the job or if he didn't win the job. So I think that gives BYU a lot of options to work with where you kind of have 2 players that are locked in for this year. And I think also what kind of factors in a little bit to the conversation, and he's the 3rd quarterback, is McKay Hillstead. I would expect he's the 3rd QB, wouldn't you say? I mean, I feel like for the observations, he's been the best out of the Bourget Hillstead grouping. What is your long-term vision of him? And it doesn't factor into 2024 per se, but do you feel like in 2025, he's got the higher ceiling than Jake? And so to me, if that's the path, go with the starter or the senior in Gary Bohannon for now. If Gary struggles, then you go to Jake. He's got another chance, another season potentially to lay claim as QB1 if he inserts himself. And then if that doesn't happen, well, 2025 comes around, or at the end of this year, McKay Hillstead can get work into the conversation.
There's a couple wild cards at play with this quarterback decision. Everything you said, I agree with. I just don't know if Aaron Roderick agrees with that. I like, if it's all things equal, I got to imagine he's thinking, which quarterback allows me more dynamic run opportunities? And that's probably Gary Bohannon.
No question.
From what we've seen in camp, he's bigger, he's more athletic. Which quarterback was more highly recruited? Gary Bohannon. Whether or not that's fair at this stage of their careers, I don't think it is. But you got to believe in the back of some coaches' minds, maybe A-Rod, maybe not, who knows? He's never said as much, but is there that thought that, hey, this dude was once a 4-star Elite 11 quarterback. Could he regain that type of hype, even though we haven't seen it much in his college career? Does that play a factor as well? I don't know. History would tell me, if all things are equal, Aaron Roderick is going to lean. Who is going to be a better dual threat? And that would be Gary Bohannon.
Yes.
I think we've seen that throughout time with Aaron Roderick and his quarterback choices. Tanner and Zach. Tanner was way more experienced, so he got the nod, but quickly they went to Zach because Zach was more dual threat.
After that Utah State
And then between Jaron Baylor and Jacob Conover, one of those 3 quarterbacks was clearly more athletic than the other 2. Jaron Hall. Yep. And he went with Jaron. Last year, there was a situation where Keaton was more experienced and clearly the guy, so there wasn't a choice of is it Jake or Keaton. But now we're in a situation where, Jake probably is a little better passer still than Gary Bohannon, and probably always will be. But Gary is more athletic. And does that fit A-Rod's offense? So it's going to be a fascinating decision, but I don't think, regardless of what happens tonight at the scrimmage, I don't think there's been any separation. I think you can go either way, and it's just going to come down to A-Rod's preference on which quarterback's going to run his offense.
And I've always been of the belief, too, that, okay, go with Bohannon, QB1, fine. But if he struggles where you go a quarter and it's just you're stalling, you haven't done anything. Think about so many games last year, that Texas game we went to where BYU did nothing for the entire game. And Kalani in the postgame got asked, did you consider benching Keaton? And then Keaton, the week after he's done, and it was injury, but it was like, is it a combination of performance and injury? Like,
right.
It was this kind of gray area a little bit. But if you can't go through an entire game with that.
No.
Not this season.
But do the coaches feel I could not agree more with
Roderick said that he doesn't want to play two quarterbacks. And I interpret that as, I think back to the Bronco Mendenhall 2010 year where it was Riley Nelson one drive, Jake Heaps the next, Riley Nelson one drive. He's not going to do that. But if there is performance where you're struggling, you got to go to the next guy. And then guess what? The next week, just say, the battle's on again. And this week, you didn't have it, Gary. Jake, you performed well, but guess what? Compete again, and let's see who's the next QB. I just feel like I'm coming away from fall camp feeling like BYU's quarterbacks have improved. Gary's health has been a storyline. He looks healthier. He looks a lot better than he did in spring.
Yep.
But I think I agree with you that it's not decisive where I just go, yep, Gary is just head and shoulders. I wanted to see that this week where Gary was just decisively better than Jake Retzlaff. And look, part of it maybe was, we saw Gary a lot with the second team offense this week in the media observation periods, but I'm okay with, give Gary the first crack, and then Jake is right there. And, either way, I just think that I feel like Gary, though, there's this element of
is that going to happen, though? Because
the athleticism with Bohannon, I think, is better than Retzlaff.
It is.
Retzlaff's more of a scrambler.
For sure. But is that going to happen? Because we've seen scenarios with Aaron Roderick where that hasn't been the case. I'll never unsee that first interception from Jaron Hall against Notre Dame where it was like, my goodness, this Jaron Hall looks like a shell of himself.
Yeah, to give Roderick a little bit of leniency, I guess, I could tell myself, too, 65% Jaron Hall is better than 100% Conover. I could entertain that thought. This year it's different, though. It's unprecedented for Kalani and Roderick, where you've got two QBs where no one in Cougar Nation is looking at these guys as being the face of the program for long term. Gary, of course, only 1 year. Jake's got 2, but no one's saying these are the next chosen ones at the quarterback position. And you just got to find answers. You got to get to 6. I know there's this talk of if BYU gets to 5 wins, that Kalani would still be around. Like, don't let Tom Hommel have a tough decision. You got to get to 6. You got to get back to the postseason, and you got to win at all costs. And if that means yanking a QB around a little bit and finding an answer with the next guy in, you got to do that to make sure you're getting wins and getting to 6, because that, to me, you got to get to that win total. That'd be a nice accomplishment. I can entertain the thought of 5 and 7 and bringing back the staff, but I'm telling you, the fan base would not be happy. That would be a very disgruntled fan base, and they probably wouldn't want to pay the ticket prices the next year if they keep losing games. So you got to get it right, and I feel like this year, anything that we've known in the past with how they've handled QBs, I don't know if it applies this year, because it's just such a unique year when it comes to the quarterback position for BYU.
Hey, I hope you're right, because
I'm hoping too.
I think that's a fair point, which is whoever gets that first crack, it's got to be earned. There's a lot of examples throughout the history of college football, a little bit like the Cam Rising situation when he took over for Brewer. He came in the next week and rescued that season for them.
Yeah.
And then who's going to do that this year, whoever that is, whether it's the guy who starts the first game or not, it's got to materialize in a game.
And I just feel like that first opponent, and I know we'll get to Southern Illinois a little bit later this show, maybe it's an early check-in, but you got to win. And you got to look, FCS teams have gotten a lot better, but still, you got to have a nice performance that makes you feel a little bit good. You don't want to hear in the post game Kalani having to say, I had to remind the guys that they won. That's happened too many times. Portland State, Sam Houston, even last year against Southern Utah. Yeah, they got, 40, but even the Southern
30.
Utah coaches in the post game saying that's not a good football team. BYU's not that good. They're not going to do well in the Big 12. Well, he's kind of right. He kind of called it. So, there were struggles too many times last year. You got to. One thing that gives me confidence too, Matt, that I've liked about the offense in fall camp is that they are getting in plays. They're not struggling. You're not seeing these administrative penalties. At times with Hillstead and Bourget, you're seeing a little bit of confusion. That's to be expected. Retzlaff and Bohannon, they're getting the plays in quick. They're making it. They're operating. They got a good pace, a good rhythm. I'm liking that. And look, that's a very low bar, but that was a struggle last year.
Yep.
And I think that is, again, a sign of progress happening for this BYU offense.
Let's take a break, Mitch. On the other side, let's talk some defense. What's happening with Jay Hill's defense in his second year? We'll break that down on the other side.